So, the power of perspective, reframing challenges into opportunities. That's what we're going to get into today. First, we're going to try and understand what perspective really is beyond the English definition of perspective. What kind of power does that carry? Why is it an important part of our personal or professional lives? And then what is reframing and how could we get that? Put in the chat, what do you see on the screen?
Don't be deceived by him. He just wanted to tell that it's 11 o'clock in the Philippines at night and he's still in the class. So Mark, God bless.
Amazing that you're here. Well done.
Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. We're very grateful to be able to share about Acquaint and support this wonderful mission with IFPO.
Actually, our case is two senior guards on the same site have ongoing tension.
This scenario is pretty simple because it's not only at two guards level, it can go way above that as well.
Our case is about a site manager struggling with high absenteeism.
Our reality is not defined by what happens to us, but by how we choose to see it. When perspective shifts, stress turns into strength and chaos into clarity. Staying calm under pressure is a choice, one that transforms how we lead and live. Change your lens, and you'll change your life.
Good afternoon, good evening, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us from different parts of the world. My name is Nisha, and I'm delighted to welcome you on behalf of IFPO to session 7 of our Beyond Business Lead Forward series, a learning journey designed to inspire growth, reflection, and leadership transformation. Before we begin, I would like to quickly go over a few participation guidelines to help us make this session interactive and inclusive for everyone. If you would like to share a comment or question during the discussion, please raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand feature and I'll unmute you in turn. Otherwise, you won't be able to unmute yourself. When speaking, please try to keep your comments concise, about 30 to 40 seconds, so everyone gets an equal opportunity to contribute. If anyone goes over the time limit, I'll gently raise a red flag as a reminder. It's just to make sure that everyone has a fair and balanced chance to share their thoughts. Today, I am pleased to share that IFPO MENASA has its knowledge partner, Ryan, our knowledge partner with SME Security Middle East Magazine and Conference. He's the commercial director working collectively to promote thought leadership, professional growth, and security excellence across the region. Welcome, Ryan. I will proceed to the session details. Over the past 6 sessions, we have explored powerful themes like growth mindsets, communication, focus, leadership, and overcoming limiting beliefs. Each session has brought together remarkable insights, authentic conversations, and active engagement from our growing global community. For those who may have missed any of our earlier sessions, we are dropping our YouTube link in the chat box where you can revisit all the previous episodes. And if you are not already connected with us on LinkedIn, please we share all the details and upcoming session announcements there. The LinkedIn page is also available in the chat box. We would love for you to be part of our professional community. So today's session is special, not just because of the topic, but because of the perspective we are bringing into it. As we explore reframing challenges into opportunities, we are reminded that growth often begins when we open ourselves to new ways of seeing, listening, and connecting. In that spirit, IFPO is proud to extend its collaboration with Acquaint, who brings people together from over 100 countries for meaningful one-on-one conversation, fostering empathy, intercultural understanding, and human connection. This partnership reflects the very sense of today's theme, the power of perspective. Together, IFPO and Acquaint aim to empower individuals to grow not only as professional but as empathetic, globally aware leaders. To share more about their mission and how they're creating impact worldwide, I'm pleased to invite our Catherine to share a few words.
Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. We're very grateful to be able to share about Acquaint and support this wonderful mission with IFPO to serve communities and support emerging leaders. So I'm just going to share my screen briefly. And Zainab and I are going to talk a little bit about Acquaint. Once again, very, very grateful to be here at this event today. So I'm Catherine Mahan, as Misha shared, one of the co-founders of Acquaint, and also joining us is Zainab Hussain. Hello, Zainab, how are you?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Zainab from Pakistan, and I'm operations assistant at Acquaint, and it's a pleasure to meet you all here today.
Yes, and I'm also excited because this is our first time at one of these live grit coaching sessions. Although I've seen some of the recorded events, and I strongly believe that if everyone were to join these lessons that we're all here for today with Marine, we'd have vastly more productive and more collaborative societies. So what is Acquaint and how is it related to this session? Well, it's a free platform where you can strengthen human connection and communication skills through global one-on-one conversations. We believe that the ability to understand different perspectives is one of the most valuable skills a person can have. In fact, I love that quote at the beginning, change your lens, change your life. I think that's so powerful. And whether you're leading a team, managing security operations, engaging with the public, perspective taking helps us see nuance and build trust, and not to mention make wiser decisions under pressure. And that's why we're so aligned with IFPO's Lead Forward series. These grit coaching sessions help us learn new leadership and communication tools, and Acquaint offers a space to practice them in the real world with friendly strangers from across the globe. And on our platform, volunteers from over 110 countries are matched for structured one-on-one dialogues. The goal is not to debate or to try to agree with each other. It's to listen, learn, and connect with someone whose background or worldview may be entirely different from our own. And these dialogues stretch how we think, they build empathy, and they make us better communicators and better leaders. So I'm going to pass it to Zainab, who's going to share a bit about her experiences.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So, volunteering with Acquaint has truly shown me the power of perspective, I must say. Because when I joined Acquaint, I thought it would just be about connecting with people. But it became about understanding how differently we all see and respond to the world. I remember one dialogue session where a participant had a complete opposite opinion from mine. So instead of reacting, I decided to listen first. Hearing their side changed the way I viewed the topic. It taught me that sometimes understanding matters more than agreeing. So I carried that lesson into my professional life too. I remember during a university event, for example, I was helping manage a crowd when people started getting impatient. So instead of getting frustrated, I used what I had learned at Acquaint, staying calm, speaking respectfully, and diffusing tension through understanding. And it worked. So these experiences showed me that perspective taking isn't limited to conversations. It's a key skill in any role that involves people or human interaction in general. It builds empathy, eases tension, and creates understanding where it's needed most. And that, for me, I believe is the true power of perspective. And if I talk about the impact of appreciation that we have in our community, on your screen, these are the examples pulled up on. So these are about reflections that our volunteers exchange about their conversations once they are done. And it's really impactful in our community.
Yes, absolutely. We love sharing these reflections. And if you find today's session inspiring and you want to take these lessons further, Acquaint is a great next step where you can join as a volunteer for free, have authentic global conversations, and continue developing the perspective shifting skills that you're learning through this series. And I will share, in a bit here, I will share a link in the chat, and we'd love to have you be a part of our global community. Everybody here is invited. And thank you again to IFPO for inviting us to collaborate and for championing the kind of growth mindset that is essential to real leadership.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Zeynep, for sharing those inspiring insights. What you shared beautifully connect with what we will be exploring next. And now it's time to dive into today's main session. We are joined by Mehreen Awais, a mindset coach whose work focuses on helping individuals and teams unlock potential by shifting perspectives and developing growth-focused habits. Mehreen will guide us through the power of perspective, reframing challenges into opportunities, a theme that lies at the heart of leadership and transformation. Over to you, Mehreen.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic introduction to Acquaint. I'm so glad to have learned more about it. So thank you, Zainab and Catherine. In fact, I'm really inspired to go read up on it a bit more and see how I can contribute and be part of this wonderful community that you've created. And of course, thank you to IFPO, particularly Nadeem, for always going, above and beyond to find and build such amazing collaborations. So for everybody who's here, first of all, hello. I know lots of repeat people are here. I was following your names, and it's always so wonderful to see all of you come back. And everybody who's new here, huge welcome from me. So for those of you who know me, awesome. Hope you still remember me. And for those of you who don't, like Misha said, I am a full-time corporate trainer, coach, public speaker, mentor, multiple hats, and I enjoy wearing each and every one of those hats. I do a lot of work around, with leaders, with executives, but also individuals, often teens and young professionals. And most of my work is around mindset building. So as we know, perspective comes from the kind of mindset you carry, and the kind of mindset you carry determines what perspective you build. I love drawing from neuroscience. So you'll see that today, as many of you who have been coming to these sessions regularly know that in every one of these sessions, I love to bring some neuroscience nuggets. I'm an emotion intelligence practitioner. So I do, I always kind of circle around emotions and thoughts and try and understand how our emotions and thoughts and beliefs dictate our behavior. There's a LinkedIn link right there. If anybody would like to connect with me, that would be great. We could have conversations. Like Catherine said, conversations are really at the center of our development, whether that's personal or professional. And I just noticed a little typo in leadership. So that's good. Shows me my brain is still working. All right. So the power of perspective, reframing challenges into opportunities. That's what we're going to get into today. First, we're going to try and understand what perspective really is beyond the English definition of perspective. What kind of power does that carry? Why is it an important part of our personal or professional lives? And then what is reframing and how could we get that? So the kind of format we're following today is I'm going to get through about 30 minutes of content. So any questions or comments during that period, just put them in the chat and Misha will moderate them and I'll get back to them in the end. Then we're going to get into breakout rooms because I know that's very popular with everybody who's here. And we're going to use the concepts that I discuss to kind of, unpack 3 cases that I'm bringing to the session today. All right. Okay, so before we get into it, put in the chat, what do you see on the screen? What image do you see on the screen?
Some people are saying rabbit and duck, some are saying only rabbit, and some are saying only duck, and some are saying duck changing into rabbit.
Interesting. All right. So I've done this exercise with so many people from different ages, and everybody gives me a different answer. And frankly, every time I look at this image, I see a different version of it. So yes, some people saw a rabbit first, and then they said, oh, hold on, I also see a duck. Some people only saw a rabbit. Some people only saw a duck. Some people saw the duck first, and then they shifted and saw the rabbit. So what this means is that the image didn't change. The image stayed the same. It's the frame you saw it with. That's what changed how you saw it and what you saw, or what you saw first. And that's exactly the kind of point that I'm going to drive today. This is very similar to our favorite half empty, half full glass of water metaphor that we often use. What does that even mean, right? When we say that, it's the same thing. Either ways, whether you call it half full or half empty, but depending on what you call it, it creates a certain emotional reaction or a mindset reaction. If you look at it half full, there's certain emotions related to it, and if you call it half empty, there's a certain thought process that's accompanied with it. So what is the part? So that essentially is perspective. Perspective is the frame or the lens. I loved how one of the initial quotations has the word lens because it kind of primes me into using that word a lot more during the session. It's one of my favorite words to use because just as you do with a camera, there are multiple lenses. You could add a lens, you could remove a lens, you could zoom in, you could zoom out, and all of them determine what kind of experience you walk away with, what kind of emotions you get into, and what kind of progress you make, whether that's personal or professional life. That is perspective. To be able to know what lens you're looking through and to have that awareness, what lens you're looking through, if it's serving you or limiting you. That lens is what determines what kind of perspective you have into a certain situation. Perspective, like I said, is important because it determines our emotions, our thoughts, our beliefs, and eventually our behavior. We've talked about this many times in these series in the past, that however we act and however we behave is just the tip of the iceberg. That's just a little part of what we see, the visible behavior. But the bulk of it is under the water, under the iceberg, which is our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and our beliefs. So perspective does the work around that. It not only changes how we act, but also changes how we feel and what we believe about a certain situation. So it does carry a lot of power to reshape all of that and to reinvent that cycle. And we're going to look into that a little bit more in a while. It helps us regain control over our reactions. We're going to talk about something called as the auto response or autopilot mode of the brain. That's when we have little awareness of how we are reacting to certain situations. And of course, when we have little awareness, we don't know how to change that. So those are our blind spots. But when we have perspective, we not only know our blind spots, but we have the power to switch them, to replace them. It expands our choices. We have more control over our reactions. Hence, we have more possibilities in front of us. We can even create more possibilities than just the autopilot reactions of our brain. It, of course, improves communication. It improves the human element, compassion. When you have less bias and judgment towards others or this kind of situations that you're in, it increases your happiness, your creativity, your positivity, and overall, the positivity index of your life improves. It shapes our mindset. It influences every little decision and outcome that we go through. And we're going to see that in a bit, that whenever there's a certain perspective, when we carry that, it determines what kind of action we take, but then also what kind of decisions we get into. And sometimes we say this, that we didn't have an option, we didn't have choices, but that's because our perspective on that was limited. So when we broaden our perspective, there's more possibilities that open in front of us. And decisions also become easier. Whoops, what happened? Yeah. All right, so let's get into a little bit of neuroscience. Fun fact, brain's job is survival, not perspective. And you'd be wondering then, why are we here talking about perspective if that's not even the brain's primary job? Well, it is not the brain's primary job because the brain's job is to help us survive. It is not about accuracy. It's simply about making through. So think about back to the primitive evolutionary man. They had real dangers in front of them, right? In those moments, it was not important whether something was accurate, whether they had perspective or not. It was as simple as making sure the brain could detect the threats in front of them and could survive. Perspective is what happens when we rewire our brains. So from an autopilot response, our brain is not wired for perspective, it's wired for survival, but we can take control of that. And this is something that has to be put in intentionally. And that's where some of the strategies that I'm bringing today are going to come in. All right, there you go.
How well can you stay focused on a simple counting task? Let's test our concentration by trying to count how many times these balls bounce. Each time a ball hits the ground counts as one bounce. Get ready, the balls will start bouncing in 3, 2, 1. So how many times did the balls touch the ground? What else did you see? Did you notice the balls change shape? Did you notice the background colour changed? If you notice these changes, were you still able to count the correct number of bounces? Our brains can only take in so much information. We can easily miss things that are clearly in front of us, simply because our brain is busy doing something else. For us to see a change, like the shape of the circles, it has to be important or different enough for us to notice. When we do, we'll most likely lose track of what we were doing to begin with. This simple activity shows there's a limit to what our brain can handle, and we need to think about what we focus on, especially at times of increased risk. Now that you've got the hang of it, let's have another turn at the counting activity. Test your concentration again. How did you go this time around? 10 was the correct number of bounces. What else did you see? Did you notice the shaded area change shape? What about the background colour? Did you see the ghost appear? How about the ball with the face on it? If you spotted any of these, how did you go with correctly counting the number of bounces? It can be easier to spot these elements when our brain is primed to be on the lookout for them. However, we can't process everything on the screen and count the bounces successfully. Our brain can only take in so much information. What blind spots do you need to be managing today? Thanks for participating. To see more brain-based animations, make sure to visit our YouTube channel. Just search Centres Digital.
All right, so what that video showed us is two things. That when we're focusing on a problem, we literally stop seeing anything and everything else. So how many of you, I mean, just put it in the chat, how many of you, I could see Misha nodding, how many of you did miss a lot of those important cues when you were watching the very first time? So just say on the chat, did you spot it or not? Yeah, so some of you did miss it. And then when they told you to be on the lookout for it, how many of you did see some of the obvious ones like the color change, because he did point out the color change to you? How many of you then did notice it the second time? Right, so what that video shows us essentially is that, like I said, when you focus on the problem, your brain stops focusing on anything else. And all you see is the problem. And when you are on the lookout of it, that's when perspective comes in. That's when you know what to look for. And then when you start seeing some of those more obvious, less obvious things. And that's the power of perspective. When you know what to look out for, what patterns your brain is exhibiting, you are in a much better position to control some of your autopilot reactions. So there is this concept known as the tunnel effect. Now, before I explain, what the tunnel effect does is pretty much what does the tunnel do? When you're walking into a tunnel or when you look at the tunnel from one end, you have a very constricted and constrained view of things. You'd look at everything through a certain lens. And when that happens, your brain will scan the environment and give you evidence and proof of whatever you're looking at through that lens. So for example, if you've made up your mind that somebody is out to get you, or your boss hates you, your brain is going to scan for every information, every evidence that supports it. Your boss talks to you in a negative tone, you're going to spot that. But the next day, your boss is going to give you an encouraging comment, your brain is probably going to miss it. That is called the tunnel effect. And that is when you know that your perspective, your perception is limited. That's when your brain is under a lot of stress. So if you look into this from a neuroscience angle, there's RAS system, which is your brain's gatekeeper. It decides what information is going to get filtered into your brain so that what needs to be paid attention to. This is where amygdala plays a very important role. So amygdala is your, we've talked about amygdala many times before. All right. So amygdala is your brain's threat detector. It scans your environment and sees whenever there's a threat in the environment, it sends a signal to your brain. And that's where your emotional brain lights up. So of course, in the evolutionary man's time, there were real stresses in the environment. And when there were physical dangers in the environment, it does make sense for your brain to zero in and, to zero in on the threat. So because survival was the main concern. In modern day, there are no physical dangers, or so I hope. The dangers in workplace are all emotional or psychological. So when your brain is focusing in on it, because your brain can't tell between what's the physical threat, what's the emotional threat. It just scans for a threat, and that's all that matters to it. So when there's an emotional threat or a psychological threat, for example, you got negative feedback from your boss, your brain will still start only paying attention to that particular threat that the brain has detected. What perspective does is, and then what reframing does is, that it engages your prefrontal cortex. The terminology that I use quite a bit. Prefrontal cortex is able to calm the amygdala down, to save your brain from the amygdala hijack. We've talked about this many times before as well. And to let the brain know that there's no real threat in the environment, and it engages your rational brain to slow down and take a wider perspective of things. And that's when you realize that there are other options available to you. So when the amygdala is in charge, that's when your brain is working on autopilot. If any of you drive, when you're driving on auto mode, you're not really, your everything's in neutral, you're comfortable, you don't have to make any quick decisions. Maybe it's a highway you've taken 100 times before, and you don't have to think so much about it. You might even take a phone call, you might listen to music, you might, do any number. Sometimes I know people, they drive with one hand and they're doing something else with the other hand, because that activity is automatic for you. Brain is simply the same. When the brain is on autopilot, it will preserve the energy. Brain is lazy, essentially. It doesn't want to use up too much resources. So it would like to go on autopilot mode. When you're on autopilot mode, you would act out of reaction. It is the simple practice of putting things into perspective, changing that lens, that's going to bring you out of the autopilot mode and rewire your brain. So while a situation might seem like a threat, but the only way to zoom out from that and see it from a different lens is to change your perspective around it. So look back to the picture you saw of the rabbit and the duck. The picture stayed the same. So your situation will stay the same, but it's how you look at it and what lens you put on it will make all the difference. So there's a wonderful technique, which is called the APR technique, which is awareness, pause, and reframe. The idea is first to be aware of these nuances, then to take a pause, and then to learn the art of reframing. So let's get into that for a little bit. How do we get that awareness? We keep talking about it, but how do we get it? Awareness is about broadening the lenses that are available to you. If you only have just one lens to your camera, then there's only so much you could do with it. But if you keep adding the lens, if you have the awareness to begin with that I must get new lenses, B, hey, what lenses do I need in the first place? I remember 2010, I think, is when digital photography became huge, and I got gifted my first digital camera. And the one I got gifted was the basic one. It just had that one lens on it. And of course, I got wonderful pictures, but it's only when somebody else gifted me a set of two more lenses, and I put them on and I said, wow, everything's changed for me. I can take different pictures, I can take zoomed in pictures, I can take portraits. So that made all the difference. Your real life is no different. So how do you add, increase this awareness? First, seek diverse perspectives. You don't know what perspectives there are out there till you make an effort to find out about that. How do you do that? You meet different kinds of people. You talk to them, have honest conversations with them, human conversations with them, get to know their cultures, get to know their situations, get to know how do they deal with things. Expand your knowledge. Read books, listen to podcasts, get into series like the ones you're listening to right now. The more information and knowledge you get, the wider your perspective will become. And of course, my very favorite, because I'm a coach myself, I have to talk about it. One of the biggest ways to broaden your perspectives is to get a coach or a mentor, or a mixture of both. And if you have to get only one, then coaching is possibly a better fit. What that does is it doesn't add somebody else's perspective, but it helps you get a deeper look into what your perspectives are, which ones are not serving you, and which ones are serving you. And then there's this tool that I'm a huge believer in, which is called the extended disc. I've spoken about it in the past as well. It's also a great way to get to know your behavior patterns and to understand how to shift what kind of perspectives are available to you. More than that, to understand what kind of lens you're wearing, what kind of masks you're wearing, and whether that's limiting you or serving you. How do we create the pause that we talked about? Now, I talked about the loop of behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Your thoughts, driven from your beliefs, drive certain emotions, and your emotions drive certain behaviors. This loop is what is manifested in whatever you see as actions. When you pause long enough, you start seeing your thoughts and your feelings. So the thing with this loop is that it happens almost instantly. You think something, you feel something, and you act immediately. And that's where the problem is. When you pause just long enough for you to understand what thought is going through this head of yours, what kind of emotion that is leading to, it would give you the chance to step back and either stop the behavior that's not serving you, or to create a new behavior that would serve you more in that moment. Pause is essential for that reframe to happen. So I'll give you an example. The way you think really, really matters. The thoughts that are going in our heads really matter. But because we don't pause and pay attention to them, the autopilot happens really fast. So if you just pause enough to just say it out loud, or write it on a piece of paper, or just to listen to what's going on in your brain, you can have the awareness that is important to create that reframe. So for example, I'm a failure. When you realize that, then that could lead to, hey, what did I learn? That's the reframe that I'm building towards. I'm bad at this can become, I want to get better at this. It's not good enough. I did the best I could. And why is this happening could become, what is this teaching me? And as you can see, the left side of the comments are leading to a certain set of emotions, whereas the right side of comments lead to completely different types of emotions. This is what's called cognitive reframing. You recognize the automatic negative thought that comes almost instantly into your head. You recognize it. For example, I always mess up at meetings. Then you challenge it. You challenge it by finding evidence for or against. For example, you can ask yourself, what's my evidence for this? Or what is my evidence against it? So, for example, one idea wasn't accepted, but others were praised. And then finally, you replace it. Create a balanced, constructive version of that thought. For example, I often share good ideas that do get noticed. So instantly, your story is changed. So I'm just in a minute, if you could put on the chat, when you're under pressure on site or handling a client complaint, what kind of story does your brain start telling you? What thought goes through your head? What belief gets triggered? What narrative starts shaping in your head? All right, so with the story that you put in, perspective lies in the power of taking control of the story that your brain is creating and putting a spin on it. So I love this model to do that, to be able to look at the difference between what is fact and what is the story that your brain is trying to create. So your fact is what actually happened. It's just an observation. There's no judgment attached to it. Story is the meaning or assumption that you're adding to it. And you fact check it by asking yourself a bunch of questions that test your assumptions. So let me show you an example. Fact is, 2 people left the meeting early. It's just an observation. There's no judgment attached to it. The story your brain might instantly tell you, if on an auto responses, they don't value my input. And then you test that assumption by asking yourself some questions that get you evidence for or against. Were they leaving for another commitment? Did they already have the information they needed? That helps you differentiate or separate the fact from the story. So with that as bedrock, I'm going to give you some strategies, and this might be a good time to take some notes. And then, because we're going to, hopefully you're going to bring these into the cases that we're going to get into in about 10 minutes from now. So how do you do all of that? How do you, get the perspective? How do you master the art of reframing? Here are a few strategies to do that. One of my favorite is the power questions. Of course, as a coach, when you work with a coach, the coach asks you the power questions. And that's why coaching is so powerful in terms of getting perspective. But you could also do this for yourself by getting into the art of self-questioning. For example, what else could be true here? With whatever I'm feeling or thinking, what else could be true? It's one of my favorite questions. What might be something that I'm not seeing? Those are your blind spots. How might this challenge be helping? Yes, this seems difficult, but how might this be helping me? What is in my control right now and what is not in my control right now? With that, I've got into this technique before, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but the 5 whys technique is when there's a difficult situation, you ask, or sometimes you could also call it a 5 what technique or a 5 how technique. That if there's a challenge, ask yourself why 5 times or ask yourself what 5 times. And it helps you go deeper into the problem and zoom into the problem to get to a different angle or to, get to the other side of the coin. So for example, my thought is that I'm really bad at my work. I'm not competent enough. Why? Why am I thinking that? Because I made a mistake. Why? Because I didn't understand the instructions. Why? Because I wasn't clear in asking for them. And before you know it, because you're asking yourself why so many times, you'll start peeling that onion and get to the bottom and usually non-judgmental fact of the matter rather than the story, which usually comes with its own set of emotions, and you get down to the fact of the problem. The flip it technique really borrows from the cognitive reframe model that I was telling you about. Think about, and this is a common metaphor we use a lot, the pink elephant metaphor. Every time somebody tells you, hey, don't think about the pink elephant, the first thought that comes to your head is the pink elephant. So, and that's the automatic brain response as well. When the brain is so used to thinking of negative responses, automatically any situation will immediately first trigger the negative response. So your job is to first catch it. Notice the limiting, unhelpful, or stressful thought that your brain is trying to process. For example, this situation is impossible. And it's amazing how many times we say this. Then you challenge it. And this is similar to the concept where I said find evidence for or against. So ask yourself, is there another way to see this situation? What is it something I'm not seeing, or what is something that I'm missing? What else could be true here? Maybe this situation is not impossible, but just unfamiliar. Or maybe I don't have clarity on this situation. So automatically you've started seeing the situation in a different way. And then you flip it. Flipping it is essentially what? Reframing it. So when flipping it means that before, when you've understood that this is limiting, this is unhelpful, flipping means that you need to reframe it into a more balanced, action-oriented, solution-oriented approach. So for example, this is tough, but it's a chance for me to grow. It's a chance for me to learn. It's a chance for me to extend myself. For example, thought my team isn't motivated. Flip it. Maybe they don't feel seen or involved. What else can I do? How could I handle the situation differently to engage them better? And you'll see here that another difference is that the focus moves away from they're the problem or situation is the problem and I have no control, to I am in control, I am in charge, and what can I do to change this situation? So it's them versus I. So here are a few more examples of the flip it technique. So I'll read a few out just for lack of time. I can't handle this pressure. Can look, when you flip it, it could read something like, I've handled tough situations before, and I can use my strengths or learnings from those times and see how I can deal with this time. This client is impossible, or my boss is impossible. Well, they're teaching me to be patient, better listeners. They're challenging me so I can grow and become better. Then another technique is called the from to frame. So pay attention to where you are and where you want to move to. So for example, are you problem focused? So from problem focus, you move to solution focus. From control, you move to influence. From fear of failure, you move to curiosity. So anything that's limiting, you identify that as a from point or an X point, and you have to move to Y point, which is your flipped mindset. So this is great to understand what mindset you're standing at and what kind of, new mindset you're trying to get to. So this is also great for the awareness stage. Now, language, of course, plays a huge role. So when you saw it here, it was the language that was making all the difference, right? From problem focused to solution focused, from control to influence. Language is huge when you're reframing. So the words you use create the lens that you're trying to create, trying to put on your situation. So some of my favorite ones I've shared here. When you say things like, I have to go to work or I have to work on this project, it's limiting you. But when you change your language to I get to or I choose to, that immediately puts you in a different mindset. I get to go to work today. I get to work on this project today. Then another one is I should to I could. I should do this. I'm not working really hard. I should know how to do Excel. I should know how to present better. You can move this to I could, because it immediately moves you on a learner's mindset track. Then you ask yourself, now that I know I could do this, let me question myself, what is it that I need to do to get here? Then the what if phenomena. Move from catastrophe to possibility. Both are what ifs. What if I fail? Catastrophe. What if I try and I don't fail? What if I try and I learn something? Both sentences start with what if, but the first one is catastrophe and the second one is possibility. Then we love to use language which is in extremes, like never. My boss never praises me. I always fail this. If we change that to frequently, often, sometimes, immediately we are able to reframe our problem. Temporal reframing is when you shift your perspective across time. I can't remember, but one of the a CEO of a big company, I can't remember which company it was, which organization it was, but they said that whenever you're stuck in a problem, ask yourself, is it going to matter in 2 hours, 5 hours, 24 hours, 1 day, 5 days, a week, a month, a year from now? If you've gotten stuck in any of these things, possibly it's not worth getting into. So that's the kind of perspective, the zoomed out perspective we need to take. How will this look a year from now? How would I feel 6 months down the lane? How am I going to feel about this 24 hours later? What would my future self tell me about this, or think about this, or advise me about this? So it helps you step out of the present, a more zoomed in version, to a more zoomed out version, and also take into account some of your values that you associate with. One of my favorite ones is the neutral observer mode. So imagine that whatever situation you're going through, that's not happening to you, that's happening to your friend or a stranger. And if they come to you for advice, or imagine you are that person's coach or mentor, what would you say to that person? It again helps you detach to your problem and take a more zoom out view of your situation. A tip here, what I love to do is that I pretend that whatever situation is in front of me, that's happening in a movie or a theater performance. And I'm just sitting there and watching it as a neutral observer. And what do I learn from it? What do I take from it? And if I was the director of that movie or that stage performance, what would I do to change that situation or that scene? Again, it helps me detach to that and come up with more solutions than I would if I was right in the middle of it. An example I take with this is that if you are in a situation in a room, you have limited perspective. Maybe you'll only see the few people who are around you. But when you climb up to the first floor and you start looking at the same room from a balcony perspective, you start seeing a lot more things that you weren't seeing when you were bang in the middle of the room. Maybe you spot something that you hadn't spotted. Maybe you missed something, and maybe it's something new that you've learned, a different angle, a different person you spotted. So that's how that works. And strength reframing is when you look at the problem from a strength angle. Again, this is something that happens in coaching quite a lot, but this is something an individual can do on its own as well. So whenever situation is difficult, or whenever you having trouble perceiving a certain situation and person in a positive way, you ask yourself, what are the strengths that that person or situation is bringing to the table? And finally, role reversal. Ask yourself, if you were in that person's shoes, what would happen? How would it change? How would you start looking at the situation? So be more open and curious, and have more empathy and compassion. Literally imagine yourself being in somebody else's shoes and ask yourself, how would you deal with it? Or how would you like for the other person to look at? And what is the best way to communicate? And again, it not only helps you empathize with the person you're dealing with better, but also helps you communicate with them a lot better. The yes and approach is a great way when you're getting into a conflict and a blind spot with another individual or team, and you feel like there's only a certain lens you're looking through, and that's where conflict is born from, because everybody is looking at the situation from a different lens. So the yes and approach looks like this. Instead of a but, you just add an and. Yes, this project is delayed, and it just gives us more time to refine the design. So it doesn't limit you. It doesn't let you only focus on the problem, but helps you see what possibilities have been created as a result of that situation. So it builds psychological safety and flexibility, and leads to a more constructive and solution-oriented conversation. All right, so let that sink in for a few seconds, and then I'm gonna let you get into breakout rooms. So what we're going to do is that it's a simple question you need to get into in the breakout rooms is, what have you learned from this workshop? What strategies have really resonated with you that you can apply to the cases, to the case that you're going to be assigned to? All right. If you want to take a screenshot of this question, please do. And I'm just purposely giving you a few seconds to, for that learning to sink in before I take you to the cases. All right. So, let me look at the time. I think we're okay. Maximum we'll go just 5-10 minutes beyond, if that's okay. So Misha, I'll quickly give the instructions and I'll pass the floor back to you. All right? Does that seem okay? So because we're a little short on time, so we'll maybe make the discussion 15 minutes. And there's going to be a facilitator assigned to every room. And I would love for the facilitator to write down at least one strategy that they could come back and share in the main room as to how they would, use the power of perspective and look at the case that they've been assigned to in a different light. All right. So you definitely have 15 minutes of discussion time in the breakout room. So those are the 3 cases, and if you can take a screenshot, but I'm going to pass the mic back to Misha so she can explain the whole breakout system, logistics, and everything. Thank you so much for listening. And
there are 3 breakout rooms named on the same case number 1 with the name. So you might get to know that which case you're going to be solved. We have 3 facilitators. Imran will be in room 1, Majid in room 2, and Mark in room 3. So I will just open the breakout room. You will be getting a notification to accept, and you will automatically move into the breakout rooms.
Awesome. So I actually had the chance to go through all 3 breakout rooms, which was great. Some great conversation was happening. The facilitators were doing a great job, keeping track of the conversation and generating insights. So that's good.
Right. Thank you, Mehreen. It was a lovely session. We had a good 15 minutes with my group. The strategy was, the case was somebody entered an office and the client was upset about it and he reported, and the blame was on security. Now, what to do, how to handle this, and what is the way forward? We, as per your talk as well, the first thing that we did was we took a pause. We took a seat back and we looked at the big picture. The first thing was separate the client and the intruder, take them to different places, and then ask as many questions as possible and try to find out what went wrong. Was there a communication gap? Was it a protocol failure? Was it a security lapse? Or was it a system flaw? That something like this was never considered as part of a security protocols. So once we looked at all these concerns, we have a better picture in which what has gone wrong. When the client is concerned, if he is not at fault, then the first thing is to pacify him and tell him, okay, fine, we apologize for what has happened. However, this is something that was not part of a protocol beforehand. We will try to upgrade our systems. We will document this thing and improve our security protocol in case it was a security protocol lapse correction. In case it was not, then there is no point of putting a blame game anywhere. Blaming a security guard or a supervisor will not resolve the issue. And mind you, it is a done thing. You cannot undo it. All you can do is ensure that it never happens again in the future. So from this perspective, what we learned was that when you ask questions, once you investigate, once you find out where the flaw is, and then you put your finger on the nerve cell and it says, okay, this is what is wrong, and how do we improve on this very aspect? When that is done, you again train everybody. You ensure that everybody knows their respective domains and their responsibilities. That is how you improve systems. Systems are man-made. There's always a room for improvement. And the more we ponder over them, the more we think about them, and the more we focus on them, that is how we should go on. Thank you.
Beautiful strategy that your group came up with, Imran, was the art of asking questions, the art to be curious. So you said we are, the right ways to ask lots of questions to understand where it went wrong, what happened to it, what was the reason behind that. And in what that does is that the focus is on finding the gaps and then the solutions, because they help you move forward. Blame happens when the focus is on identifying the problem and being fixated on it and finding somebody to land that problem or the responsibility or blame of that problem on. So that's when every party involved becomes defensive. The focus then becomes on either blaming the other person or making sure that the blame doesn't come on yourself. And somewhere in the middle of that, there's not enough opportunity or time to come up with solutions or troubleshooting the problem, so something similar does not happen again in the future. So I think that's something that really took my attention. And there's another thing that I wrote here. Again, if I think you did use that word as well about communication, so the idea is, if in this particular scenario, every party was looking at the situation from a different lens. The guard had a different viewpoint about it. The client had a different viewpoint about it. They all had different emotions about it. So this was a golden opportunity. So if we really use the reframing techniques here, the idea is to sit down and think, hey, what does this opportunity or what does this situation present us with? What could we stand to gain from it? What do we learn from it? What can we do better next time? And that comes from communication. If all three parties sit down, communicate, talk about the situation in a detached style. So again, the fact story model comes into play as well. What are the facts? What story is each party coming up with? And how do we, find evidence for and against and flip that situation to understand how do we move forward? Awesome. Thank you. If anybody's got questions, now's your chance. Otherwise, we move to case 2. All right. So another thing before we move on, which just caught my attention, was that in this particular case, because everybody, and in these situations, it's very common when there's a mistake or a problem happens, everybody just wants to say, hey, I didn't do it. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. So even if you're not blaming the other party, you're quick to say, not me. I didn't do it. I have no role to play in this. So in such a scenario, a good strategy is to understand what is our shared responsibility. How do we come together and take collective ownership and responsibility of this situation? So not what did the other person do wrong and what did I do right, but as a group, what can we learn from this mistake and how can we collectively make it better next time? Awesome. Thank you. So case 2
Is Majid.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much to give me this opportunity to lead this case. Actually, I was not the leader. All the colleagues, they were the leaders. They put their thoughts in this case. Actually, our case is 2 senior guards on the same site have ongoing tension. One is strict about procedure, and the other one is more relaxed. So there's disagreement between them. We all discussed that there's a lack of communication between those 2 security guards. So as a management, we should know where they come from. Maybe they're coming from different backgrounds. They were working some in other areas. So we should know a point of agreement between them and what lens they are using of thinking. Maybe they are both right, and maybe it could be some advantage to have those both guys in our team. But the management now should come in the middle, should listen from both. We as a management should be an active listener to solve this problem. Or also we can ask them to furnish or to listen from each one if they also maybe they can furnish some solution for this problem. And we tell them that we are all one team. Our conflict should not affect our operation. We have one goal, but there should be a solution in between. And we can ask this, or we can tell the strict guy for the procedure, he should be some more flexible, but not affecting our operation. And the other guy should be more. So maybe at the end, maybe you need some sort of training after the listening from those two guys. This is in short, and this is what I can, just in short, I wrote this. This is a quick, statements. Thank you.
Beautiful. That was very in-depth. Anybody's got any comments to add on that? If you looked at that case, anything new that is coming up for you, you'll also put it on the chat. I think the key word you used was that both of them are not wrong, and none of the party needs to be right or wrong. It's about how do we collaborate. And I think when I was in your breakout room, I did hear somebody say that how about we use the strength reframing technique here, where we understand that none of the, your initial reaction could be, oh, both the guards are wrong, or both are being stubborn, or both are, being difficult, and this conflict is such a waste of time. That could be one perspective to take, but that wouldn't move us in any way. So the reframe perspective could look like, what strengths do each of the guards bring? It's not about who's right, who's wrong, but they both have strengths. They both care about the organization. They both care about doing the right thing. How could we play on the strengths? And then, like you said, improve communication, see where training needs to happen, see how the whole, structure around shifts need to happen, and a dialogue that helps us understand what is the reason that this situation happened in the first place. And then from there onwards, we move, from problem to solution. Sounds good. Anybody else who's got anything to add? I think this case is a really good example of, having a perspective of highlighting strengths and highlighting opportunity. If something is lacking, is this an opportunity for a new training? Is this an opportunity to make a change in the way shifts operate? Yeah, Akbar.
So one thing is that we shift the perspective from current to future. So we can tell them that if this is going on, so you should think what would go wrong if he's doing like this, and to minimize and bring them both, that you both are right, but this should be done to a certain level, not beyond that. So bringing them on the same page, I think that is one thing we learned from your session, that we should be focusing on the impact of the things in the future rather than in the present. Yeah.
Absolutely. Really, really good point.
Something Imran has to say.
Yeah, sorry, go for it, Imran.
Okay. Mahin, this scenario is pretty simple, because it's not only at two guards level, it can go way above that as well. Wherever you have a back-to-back arrangement, this thing is a very common phenomena. People work as per their own, I would say, personalities, and their own way of looking at it, and they both find it correct in their own perspective. Now, while you talk to both of them and you try to find a common ground, which is good, however, at times comes when you have to raise the issue a step up. And then the leadership comes into play, because you have to decide a bare minimum standard at which everybody or the company wants a certain set of actions. So it's not only talking to these two guys. If they are both correct in their own perspectives, then you need to take it up to a level where the company says, okay, fine, everybody, the strict guy has to come slow and the relaxed guy has to become slightly more stricter, so you reach a common ground. Thank you.
Absolutely. Really, really good point as well. The operative word here is alignment. All parties, yes, the two parties in conflict need to be aligned as well, but also they need to be aligned with the wider ecosystem that the organization operates in. And leadership plays a huge role in that. Awesome. Thank you. Moving on to case 3. Yes, Mark.
So
Please
again,
don't be deceived by him. He just wanted to tell that it's 11 o'clock in the Philippines at night, and he's still in the class. So, Mark,
Wow.
God bless.
Amazing
Thank
that
you.
you're here.
Thank
Well done.
yeah. So again, thank you for letting me lead our group 3. So I'll be sharing with you our discussions. Our case is about a site manager struggling with high absenteeism and low motivation during night shift. Just like me right now, I'm on night shift. So despite giving reminders and warnings, nothing has improved. So the discussion went on asking our group on what might be causing it. It can be instead of just focusing, are they lazy? Are they lazy? Why are they having this absenteeism and low motivation? We tried to shift it on, try to looking on the people's situation. Maybe there's traffic issues. Why guards are late? Maybe there are some welfare issues. Maybe they feel unsupported at night. One of the member of the group mentioned that maybe a free coffee would do the job. So we also discussed about unfair schedule. Night shifts are not being rotated fairly. And I think the common theme that we have is there's lack of engagement or communication, because people in my group have shared that during the night shift, it's really um, lean hours. Some people are not doing some things while they're on duty. So the common theme that we agreed that maybe they feel not engaged and we should communicate more. So we also discussed about what actions that we might take. So some mentioned about maybe we reward good performance instead of focusing on warnings, punishment. So we reverse it into um, um, making everyone aware that good behavior are being appreciated, so that they'll be influenced by it. Improve in welfare and welfare policy. Um, and I think the best part is having a regular meetings where we can get the staff concerns and focusing on the issues. Why are we still having this results despite all the warnings that we have? So the tools that we use actually is the 5 whys. That's the technique. We ask and ask questions to come up with these findings. And another is the role reversal, which you mentioned earlier. What if we are in their shoes? So and that is really a powerful tool that we can use, because it's understanding what's driving their behavior by putting our situation to their situation. So the takeaway is actually our group I think believes that this challenge is an opportunity for the manager to shift from control to connection. So moving away from warning towards motivation, fairness, and continuous engagement and communication. So involving the team will go a long way on solving this kind of problem. So I think that's what we can share to the group.
Awesome. I mean, the 2 techniques that you identified were spot on, because the 5 whys, what it did was it led to engagement. You put on a curiosity hat, you asked questions, try to understand what led to the situation. And that happens when you're getting into proactive engagement with the people involved. And what the second one you mentioned was the role reversal. What that led to was understanding what the situation is like for these people. Like you said, night shifts are tough. there's a lot of fatigue, it's difficult for people to do. Look at some blind spots, maybe maybe nobody realized that this is tough, maybe there's an unfair schedule, how could that be improved, maybe more breaks are needed, maybe more coffee is needed, maybe certain adjustments are needed, maybe more recognition is needed. Maybe these people are doing the night shifts but need more recognition because it's slightly difficult than the not slightly, a lot more difficult than the day schedule. So what this leads to is empathy, understanding what these people, the schedule they're following is difficult, and how do we best support them in that. Awesome. That was really good. All right. Thank you so much. Back to Misha to do her closing. But thank you everybody for participating.
Thank you so much, Marine, for those thoughtful reflections and practical takeaways. We would love to hear from all of you. Your feedback helps us to make session more relevant and impactful. Please find the link in the chat box, and Maharaj will be sharing the QR code. Please scan that and you give us the feedback. So it just take a minute. We truly value your input, please. Okay, Sipsa has to ask something from Marine.
Well, I just want to add some a comment. It's about the belonging culture within a team. We need to build a belonging culture where people all feel accepted and respected. It's very much affects the team and the way it works. It will get a best performance and ownership. They will be collaborating. They will, even the psychological safety they will have, the retention, the absence of at work, it will decrease. So feeling belonging to the institution where they work in, it even will make the pressure less. When in hard situations, they can be more patient, they can be more resilient. So the belonging culture, it's something we cannot often find in our institutions. And I think we need to have more concentrations on this side. And this will affect very much the environment of working, especially with those in the junior levels at the organization. Thank you.
What a powerful point, because like I said in the beginning, one of the reasons that organizations have limited perspective is because they've not invited more perspectives in. So if you've not created a culture where everybody belongs, B feels psychologically safe to share their perspectives, then these organizations will always have the tunneling effect, tunnel vision, limited perspective, and hence, they'd always stay stuck at their situations. Thank you for sharing.